How do we dial up our relationships with our daughters? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Today, I have with me an amazing licensed therapist named Colleen O'Grady. She is also a life coach and she is an author, and she helps moms reduce the drama with their teenage and older daughters and begin to maximize and optimize those very precious relationships. I'm so excited to have her talk about this topic on Flourish-Meant today. Welcome, Colleen. I am so glad to have you here.
I am so glad to be here too.
So I know that some of this, even though you are a professional, you're a licensed clinician and life coach, I know some of this comes from your own experience. So tell the audience why you chose this topic of mother-daughter relationships and why it's precious to your heart.
Yes, of course. Well, my whole life, I feel like, has been about teens. So I did full-time youth ministry for 10 years before I became a marriage and family therapist. And I noticed that teens were really affected by their parents while I was doing youth ministry. And then probably the biggest teacher of my entire life was my own daughter. And I thought it would be so easy because thousands of teenagers in my youth ministry thought I was the coolest person ever. And then I realized it wasn't naturally going to happen with my own daughter when she turned 11. So that really, I thought, I don't want to be the enemy to my daughter. I want to have a really good connection with her, but it's a lot harder than I thought when I was a youth minister or even a therapist.
I think that's true for all who are experts in parenting and with children. You find you're not the expert anymore when it comes to your own kids. So that is very, very interesting. And it's actually reassuring to those who are listening that it isn't just them. It's not just about you not having the tools or the equipment or the knowledge. It's just the natural part of individuation that makes us feel like we don't know what we're doing and our kids are rebelling against us, isn't it?
Yes, yes. In Dial Up the Dream, which is my newest book, I talk about there's a proverb that, as iron sharpens iron, so does one person sharpen another. But I found another translation that said, just like a grinding wheel, so does one person sharpen another. And so I think a lot of times we think if mothers is that we're sharpening our children, but our children also sharpen us. And it's this beautiful back and forthness that doesn't always feel great because sometimes the sparks are flying, but we become way better human beings because of being moms. And it's this mutual process.
If you're open to that, and that is the key. And I loved about your book, Dial Up the Dream, that you actually go into some things to look for so that you can be receptive and teachable as a parent and be a listener, not just a lecturer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, I like that, listener, not a lecturer. Yes, yes. So in the teenage years, it's easy to fall into the trap of being the 24/7 monitor. And we feel, especially towards the end of junior, senior year, because we feel this pressure to get them into college or to be successful. And so we become really focused on these data points. And so a lot of our conversations are, did you get your schoolwork done? Are you studying? Give me your phone. It's a lot of monitoring. And when your child leaves home, we can't monitor anymore. And they don't have to stay in relationship with us. So there has to be something else that keeps us connected. And Sandra Stanley was on my podcast, and she talks about parenting with the relationship in mind. And that's it. The strength of our impact on our daughters is the strength of our relationship. One of the moms that has an adult daughter or was in college, I said, "What is the most challenging thing of being a parent to a young adult daughter?" And she said, "Keeping my mouth shut." And that mothering urge to tell our kids what to do, it just never goes away, right?
That's true. It does help to be a therapist in that respect because you learn that early on, that mantra, shut up, Tina, shut up and listen, shut up and listen. So you at least have that going for you if you're a therapist, but it doesn't mean you're always going to do everything right. I know there is a huge kind of opposite ways of looking at parenting, and people tend to gravitate to one pole or another. Either they're too permissive and they want to be their kids' friends and they don't put enough boundaries in place or enough guidance in place for their kids to make healthy decisions, or they do the exact opposite, which is more what your book is focusing on. They're hovering, they're controlling, and it's a fear-based mindset as a parent. I have to make sure they do everything absolutely right. If they're not perfect, they're not going to be okay. Can you
Right.
talk about what is the healthy balance of those two, if it is even a balance?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would love to. I really believe that the foundation of parenting is the quality of the relationship. And like you said, that's not being their best friend, but it's not being their enemy either. So that quality of attachment is so important. In fact, they have found if you really do want to have a teen that's healthy and successful, they have related that back to the quality of the attachment between the parent and the teen. I think moms get such confusing messages when their teens graduate from high school, right? Because they're told you just need to let go, just let go. And so, what in the heck does that mean? And it means letting go of the monitor. That's what that means. You can't when they're gone. But and the monitor, when I say that, that means the manager. We let go of managing our teens because it's the goal of a young adult, their developmental step is to learn how to self-manage. But then there's this other factor, which is why moms are so confused when they're 18 and leaving home. And I hadn't seen anybody write about this, so this is why I wrote about it. So most of your listeners have probably heard, well, the brain isn't fully developed until age 25. So, but what does that mean when our teens are 18 and we're sending them off to college? And what does that mean when they're considered legal adults? And our teens, of course, are going to feel like, I know everything because I just turned 18. So you have a role to play. So letting go doesn't mean you don't have a role to play. You have a role to play. And it's twofold. It's that quality of attachment that takes strategy. And the other part is you're the consultant because there is a maturity gap. And that maturity gap is, even though they physically are adults and look like adults and intellectually could even be smarter than us, probably are, but they're emotionally immature. And you add that into the equation. So the undeveloped prefrontal cortex means just emotionally all over the place and impulsive decisions. So that is why moms were still needed. We still can be a consultant. And I think that's the balance because you can't control them, but they still need us to speak into their lives.
And creating that safe space, that open door where they can feel they can talk to you without making you react in a way that's going to be condemning or judging. That's really important to allowing that relationship to be one that informs their decisions.
Mm-hmm. I think you could totally relate to this, is if I hadn't been a parent, this would have been a very different book because it would have been just do this and do this here, and here are 5 steps to this. But in the book, I really share a lot of my own experiences because moms, we love intensely and we love our daughters intensely. And then we have a lot of fear because we can't manage our teens on a day-to-day basis. And so what do we do with that? And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but what happens typically when they're away at college, especially that first couple years, you might get that phone call that says, "Oh my gosh, mom, I hate everything. All the girls are really mean. I just want to leave school. I'm failing all my classes. I've got to go." And then you don't hear from them for a week. And then you're left with all this angst, and you're worried, and you're praying, and you're scared. And then finally they call you back and you say, "Wow, how are you?" And she goes, "Well, fine."
I love that you have steps that you can follow, even though it's not a do this and this will happen kind of a way of prescribing what to do. They are questions that will help parents really think about where they are and how to shift their mindset and how to get through this in as healthy a way as possible. Again, this is not about perfection. This is about creating safe spaces, healthy relationships, and forward movement and growth centered ideas. So, how could people get a copy of Dial Up the Dream and your other content and stay connected with you, Colleen?
Yes, you can buy Dial Up the Dream wherever books are sold. And I know moms are busy. And so it's definitely on Audible, so you can listen to the book also. And I'm at ColleenO'Grady.com, and that's two L's and two E's. And you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram.
Wonderful. In this second portion of our conversation with the amazing Colleen O'Grady, author of Dial Up the Dream and several other titles, she is a licensed therapist and life coach, as I have mentioned, and she's here to really inform us not just about how to relate well and parent well, but how to have an ongoing forward movement in our own lives as moms. I think, Colleen, a lot of the problem with our end years of that parenting children while they're still in our house, part of that issue is grief and fear. It's that fear of losing control. It's that fear of what will happen outside of the parents' imagined control, which we really never had complete control. Anyway, it's kind of an illusion that we like to keep. But that is the thing, it's that fear and that loss, not just of our child's presence, but of our roles. Can you talk about how the grief and the fear pressure in on moms and keep us from making the best decisions and the most healthy ways of responding to our daughters and sons?
Yes. Well, something that I did that I think was so helpful to me is I definitely can worry. And I have been a therapist for 30 years. I've consulted on the adolescent unit for a county hospital. So I've seen, all the horror stories. So it definitely can worry. So what I would do is I would write down every single one of my worries and leave a space. And then in the space, I would go back and I would turn that specific worry into a prayer. And then I would erase all the worries. And so the prayer is focused on obviously what God would want, not on the disaster. You don't want to focus on just don't let this disaster happen. It's, that you want your daughter surrounded with the right friends and that she's dating the right person or whatever, like those kind of things. You turn that around. And then you make that your mission prayer for your daughter. So, why I love that is because you are working out your own specific worry and you're turning it into something that's really helpful. Because if we're worrying, that feels like it's useful, but it's not doing anything. So if you can take that and you can turn that into an action step, which is very helpful with anxiety, but this action step is prayer. So that is one thing. There is a strategy, but I also think it's God's heart, which is that you want to focus on this relationship first. You want to be that safe place that she can kind of come home to. If that's a text, if that's a phone call, you want to be that encourager. You want to be that person that helps anchor her. Because I don't know, moms, just think back on your own life when you first left home. It can be really disorienting. And so if your son or daughter knows that you are there for her and you are safe and that you are loving and you're compassionate. And if you're not judgmental and if you're not just telling them what to do, then they want to come home in any way they can in terms of touching base with you. And that's what that attachment looks like. And if they're used to you if they feel like you criticize them a lot, you want to back up. They might not trust you at first because they may think that you're going to criticize them. So start with sending some text that are just kind of playful or thoughtful. And dogs and cats and pets are always good places to find a little connection, and or their favorite foods or their favorite restaurants or the inside jokes that you have between you and your daughter. And after that, that's their kind of love language. And after that, if they feel safe, they just start telling you more and more. Now, once they start telling you more and more, that is when you can start to be that consultant. The consultant is really what you're doing is teaching them how to think. So I remember I had one mom whose daughter was a sophomore, and her freshman year she was in the dorm and so had the cafeteria. But in sophomore year she was in an apartment, and so her mom would give her money for food. And I think we can understand what happens is that the daughter just would blow through the food like midway through the month. And she said, Mom, that's not enough money. I need more money. So you have some choices how you would respond to that. Well, you could actually give them money. You could say, what is your problem? This should have lasted the whole month. You could be more critical. Or you could say, well, let's talk through this. So where do you go grocery shopping? So this girl, she goes, well, when I do go grocery shopping, I go to Whole Foods. Okay, well, what do you do if you're not going grocery shopping? Well, I just order in. Where do you order in? Well, Grubhub. So then she said, well, why don't you maybe check out some prices at some other grocery stores? And, you're paying, $25 for a sandwich. Maybe you could go to the grocery store and you could, so it's teaching her to think. So what happened is her daughter, that was the last time she ever brought it up. So she found a way of making that money work.
I like your strength-based approach where you're looking for what's good in your child. Well, not a child anymore, your young adult, but you're
Yes.
looking for their strengths and you're focusing on that and teaching them how to use what they have to move forward in a healthy way.
Yes. So this goes back. Okay, great. So let's compare this worry versus trust. And so what we know as therapists is that our brains go to the negative in a nanosecond. We're just there. But what is also true is that our young adults have lots of strengths. And so it's really good. And I also have moms do this, is I have a practice that I have moms do, which is called gratitude, movement, and delight. So that they write down every day, if you tend to worry, what's one thing that you're grateful for your daughter? Where's one area you see movement? And what's one thing that you delight in your daughter? So if you can keep her strengths top of mind, then you can relax and know, it may be a little bit uncomfortable, but she can figure that out.
I also love that you focus on the moms and the heart of the mom after they have launched their daughter into adulthood and they're left wondering, who am I? What do I do now? Can you talk about that a little bit and address that mother who's listening, who's wondering where they fit? They're no longer clinging to their child's every moment of their lives the way they had defined themselves before their child left, but they've come into this role of consultant and they may have accepted that to some degree, but they're also wondering, now this is not my identity. Who am I? Can you talk about that to that mom who's in that space right now?
Yes. Well, again, I lived every word of this book, and I've felt every feeling that I think probably every mom has ever felt. And there gets to a place that you're not even needed as a consultant. And that's what we really want, is that they are now adults and they're ready to be on their own. But there is this loss and this grief and this hole and this emptiness because we love them and we're attached to them and this has been our life. And it can be really disorienting. And then I think there's this myth of like, I mean, what else can I do for the moms who stayed at home? I don't have any skill because I've just been a mother. Or if you're in a job, you may be just bored with it and you feel stuck. And when I was writing this book, the surprise for me was it's not just that we're there on the sidelines cheering our daughters on that they reach their dreams, but God has a dream for us that's not over. And I think as Christians, we want to do something meaningful, and being a mother is so meaningful. And so sometimes I hear these moms in my practice say, well, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I'm going to work at a retail shop. I mean, that's fine, but I don't think that's the meaning that's going to really help you let your daughter go. And so what I think is that your developmental stepmom is to start reconnecting to yourself. And I believe, out of your relationship with God, that God will start to put little clues in your heart. Like you'll go, well, that's kind of interesting that, that thing that popped up on my Instagram. Maybe I'll take that course, or maybe I'll learn that instrument. Or, you know what? I'm tired that my walls have been painted gold for 25 years. Maybe I could change my walls. And you start by paying attention to your preferences. You start following your curiosity, and also what's on your heart. What is it that breaks your heart in the world? And then just maybe God is nudging you to make a difference. So that could be through volunteer work. It could be through your church. It could be with animals, or it could be anything, because we're all different. And you don't have to be Oprah. You don't have to be like a famous person, but it's about you finding something that brings meaning. I've had mothers who, who went back to school to help kids who were dyslexic because they had kids who struggled with that. And, moms who had daughters that had mental illness and then they went back to be therapists. Or they have a heart for, the girls or boys in human trafficking and want to make a difference with that. And it may be just all those things that you've said for 20 years, like, if I had time, I would, or I don't ever get to have time for this. Now you have some time. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe God wants to just bless the socks off of you right now. And you and your husband, or you and some friends, go to Greece or something. It's very important for you to reconnect to things that light you up, that make your faith come alive, that you feel fully alive, because then that actually brings you closer to your daughter. What I've heard all these stories of the poor moms who have not been able to move past being a parent, and they're in their 60s or 70s. And so what that looks like is they go over to their adult daughter's house, or is in their 40s, and has extreme opinions about the new sofa they bought. Like, one person told me, like, oh my gosh, you bought a white sofa. No, like it was the worst thing ever. But I think the biggest gift I can give you is that God is not surprised that your daughter left. And he's not going to just leave you with a big sense of void and emptiness. It's not a surprise to God. He's got something more for you.
Such great inspiration combined with practical advice and insights. how can people get a copy of Dial Up the Dream and all of your other content and stay connected with you, Colleen?
Sure. Dial Up the Dream, Making Your Daughter's Journey to Adulthood the Best for Both of You is available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, wherever books are sold. My website is Colleen O'Grady, and that's two L's, two E's. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram.
I hope that all of you listening were blessed by this conversation with Colleen O'Grady, and will go and look into her information. She has several titles, including her latest, Dial Up the Dream. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.